Hey everybody, it's Bob Roden from Utmost Travel and Cruise Planners. And hey, welcome. Thank you for coming back today. I am privileged to be able to introduce to you Mr. Mark Murphy. Mark is an entrepreneur, best-selling author, and television travel analyst. He's also the founder and former CEO and owner of Travelliance Media, which includes brands you may have heard of like Travel Pulse. It's the largest travel news site in the world. I'll also personally say Mark is a great champion of the travel advisor, travel agent community, consistently advocating for them with national television audiences. Mark, thanks so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Good, Bob. Good. Hold up here in Fort Lauderdale. Could be worse places to be. So
There are indeed. Is it at least sunny down there since you have to kind of stay at home?
it's like 75 degrees. I'll be out on the paddleboard in about an hour. I'll be bike riding after that. Stay active, have fun. You know, that's all you can do is as opposed to being cooped up. I'm glad I'm not in my New York City apartment. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, it's outstanding. Outstanding.
Yeah.
So let me jump in here. You have traveled, reading your book. I know you've traveled to hundreds of countries. You have decades experience working with the travel industry, and you have seen the industry react to other disasters, other pandemics over the years.
hmm
How would you describe or compare COVID-19 to those other challenges that the industry faced?
Well, all the other ones came and went. This one is hanging around. I would equate it to 9/11, but the difference with 9/11 was it was a fear of terrorism and follow-on attacks. Here, it's the unknown and the uncertainty. And I think that's what is driving a lot of the concern. If you actually examine the numbers and you look at it from a very statistical basis and analyze it, you wouldn't really be worried every day. I'll just give you an example. I was driving up Federal Highway here yesterday, and there was a woman literally on the sidewalk on US 1. People don't walk along US 1 for the most part. She's the only one within, I don't know, 300-400 yards walking on the sidewalk, and she's got a mask on. Now, no offense to her, but that's beyond ridiculous in my opinion. That's my opinion. So I don't know how you're going to get coronavirus walking down a street when nobody is near you within hundreds of yards. But I think that that's what the media has driven this to. And I'm not saying it's a media-driven problem. This is a scary thing. It came on very quickly. And, you know, when you see something and you can look at it and examine it rationally, you're okay, because you can make a judgment. When you don't know what this is or what it could do to you, and you get all of these mixed messages, it's scaring the bejesus out of the average consumer and average traveler who's now terrified in some cases to step outside their house.
Yeah, it's definitely something that none of us have ever experienced before, right? And so there's underreaction. We've seen some underreaction. How about those spring breakers in Florida, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And then we see some overreaction as well. It's crazy.
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
And I guess your state just finally went on the stay-at-home plan yesterday, right?
Yeah. And, you know, so what's interesting about that is this whole one-size-fits-all idea that the whole country needs to be on lockdown is absolutely ludicrous. I think if anybody looks at this, they would say, if I'm in Oklahoma, if I'm in Tulsa, it's a very different animal than Queens, New York, which has a huge Chinese population, which actually traveled heavily for Chinese New Year. And that's one of the hot spots that's breaking out. Now, no one's really talking about that. Because that was in China back on January 31st. Everyone was screaming xenophobe and racist. Somebody called me a racist on Facebook recently, a travel agent of all people. She called me a racist because I didn't say anything or do anything. I shared a post, a news story, where Fauci, the head of the NIH, attributed the mass breakout in Italy to the influx of Chinese tourists. So that's not a knock on the Chinese. I've been to China. I love Asia. You know, to me, it's really just logic. If there's an outbreak in an area right now, people are saying we're not going to, you know, let people from Europe come in, right? Well, does that mean we're all racist against Europeans? No, it's called just protecting your borders and why we have borders. And so, unfortunately, people will interpret the sharing of news as somehow some kind of opinion or statement when it's really coming from the head of the guy that's in charge of fighting this. And that's how insane it has gotten and how irrational people have become. And I'm just hoping that as the next couple of weeks go by, we have a reversion to the mean, if you would, in terms of conversations, because there's only one way, we move beyond this, which is coming together, addressing it, and measuring risk, versus reward, if you would. And if you have to shut down the whole country, that makes no sense for the guys, you're in Texas, versus the people living in a high rise in New York City. That's the most concentrated, heavily populated city in our country. And so you just have to look at it logically. And I think if we did that as a country and let the states dictate what happens, which is what is going on with governors, they're in charge of their states. Again, even in Florida, does the same thing apply for someone living out, I don't know, in the middle of the state on a 5 acres as it does to me being in Fort Lauderdale that's more and more concentrated? It shouldn't, but unfortunately that's the way it is today, even within states.
Well, so it's interesting because I know the article that you're referring to where a travel agent called you a racist, and that was a Yahoo News article.
She had an adjective in front of it.
Oh,
Effort.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we can guess. Well, and so it was written by somebody at Yahoo News, right?
Well, it was an AP story. It was, it had run everywhere. Every outlet had picked it up, and it's a fact. And I've been saying it for weeks. Northern Italy was a very big draw for Chinese tourists. They had hundreds of thousands of Chinese living there, a ton working in the textile industry. Many had traveled back for Chinese New Year, which is a very big tradition, and a lot do it. And I've actually been to Asia during Chinese New Year, specifically for that reason. It's an amazing opportunity to reconnect with, in your case, the ethnic Chinese and ethnic Asians with your family members. It's a celebration that goes, almost 2 weeks long. And that's what happened. And unfortunately, China did not say, let's stop all these Chinese New Year celebrations. They just plowed right through. And by the time we really caught wind of it and what was really going on, the cat was out of the bag, if you would.
So as it relates to the travel industry, I want to talk a little bit about the not the far future, but not the immediate future. But first, I want to ask you about this. There are obviously going to be some changes. There are already some changes coming down within the industry as it relates to cruise lines and airlines. What in the short term, Mark, what do you expect that we as travelers will see change, and how might that affect consumers?
So if we look at airlines, there's going to be a drastic reduction in routes they fly. They're not going to have as many planes in the air. They're going to limit capacity. That, when this thing recovers, is going to drive fares up. Right now, my daughter is in Colorado. She's thinking of coming back because, everything is online with school. And so in that regard, it's now $34 or $35 round trip for her to fly back from Colorado, or $17 one way. That's going to change drastically come the fall as we get beyond this. And to be frank, all the scaremongers out there, we will get beyond this. I said in the beginning, I thought it would be about a 60-day news cycle. It's probably going to be about 90 days based on what we're seeing, the flattening of the curve, all that other conversation. Again, I'm not a doctor, an epidemiologist. I've seen the trends. I look at all the reporting. Some of it is very much politically driven, without a doubt. Some of it isn't. It's very good, straight reporting. And you really have to have a filter because the headlines don't reflect what's actually going on. And most people see a headline, they confirm their bias, whatever that happens to be, and then they move on. They don't dig deeper. And I have family members that do the same thing. So I see it in my own family. I see it on the outside. So you're going to see airlines raising prices come the fall. Right now, they just want to get people back traveling, and that's going to happen as soon as we get past this initial scare phase and we start getting into the summer. I think you're going to find incredibly aggressive hotel offers because, let's face it, no one's traveling, no one's staying in hotels. I think that's going to come back with the airlines faster in that case versus, let's say, the cruise industry. Although today, as we're doing this, UBS analyst came out with a report. It may have been published last night, and it basically said that 2021 cruise bookings, for two reasons, are actually looking pretty good, which I think is a surprise to a lot of folks. And it's a surprise more to the people who've never taken a cruise. And here's what I mean. If you are a previous cruiser, you know that cruising is safe, it's fun, it's a great value experience, which is going to get a heck of a lot more, a heck of a lot better value proposition going forward as a result of this. Unfortunately, you're going to find that those who have never taken a cruise are going to continue to beat the drum of, oh my God, you know, floating petri dish, floating this, floating that. And it's because they have no clue and they've never been on it. And again, they're confirming their bias, which is they would never have cruised anyway, because they had misperceptions that can only be corrected if you actually experience it. So I think because of the negative media coverage and everything else, the cruise industry is going to see an 18 to 24 month lag before it gets fully back where it's at. And I think the thing that's going to happen all while this is going on, I think you're going to see consolidation, which is the last thing we need in the airline industry. Most people don't realize that 85% of domestic business in the United States is controlled by 4 carriers. And, you know, in the past, when you got baggage fees and all these other things, and it's frustrating, there's really nowhere to turn, because if you're in certain hubs, you've got very limited choices outside the main carrier. And if you're in a hub where there's a little bit more action going on, again, it's only max 4 carriers, and one's going to dominate, one's going to be secondary, and the other ones might fly through on some connections, but very limited. But I think you're going to see that happen. As far as in consolidation, I wouldn't be surprised to see Norwegian Cruise Line get bought by and merged with Royal Caribbean International. I think that would be a very smart move for both lines, because they're both much smaller than Carnival Corp and all of their brands. Carnival is better positioned from a liquidity standpoint than the other two. Royal Caribbean's actually the worst position from a liquidity standpoint. And, you know, I wouldn't be surprised to see those two get together. But unfortunately, that means people are going to lose jobs, because there's going to be overlap. And that's why you do those mergers, because you eliminate a lot of redundant costs. So stay tuned. I'm not making a prediction. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised. But regardless, as a traveler or travel agent, coming out of this, there are going to be tremendous deals out there, and they're going to be in mass. I mean, you're talking all-inclusive resorts, you're talking airline tickets, you're talking international travel. And I think people have to do what they're comfortable with. But I'd be very comfortable getting on a plane tomorrow, to be frank. I don't worry about it. Worst case scenario, and I'm a cancer survivor, I get exposed to it. I'm in good health otherwise. I recovered from the cancer treatment several years ago, so I have no fear about immunity issues. And if I do get it, you know, now all of a sudden, going forward, I'm probably immune, according to the doctors, from this again. And I think that's what's really going to happen globally. As bad as it sounds, a lot of people are going to get this, and eventually it's called herd immunity. The virus is not going to have anywhere to go. And that's kind of what happened with all of these other outbreaks, SARS, you know, H1N1, you know, Zika. And keep in mind, Zika was about babies being born with shrunken heads and dying, right? That was the fear. Don't go to the Caribbean. Don't go to Mexico. Don't go anywhere, because if you get bit by one of these and you're pregnant or trying to get pregnant, and it killed the whole destination wedding and honeymoon business and romance travel business as a result. To this day, and that was around 2014, to this day, have you seen any reports of people getting bit by mosquitoes because they've been bit by mosquitoes, having babies because people who've been bit and had the Zika virus had babies? And I have yet to see any of the babies coming out in the news media talking about their shrunken heads and how terrible it is with the Zika virus. So that's kind of how I went into this, looking at this current situation. And I believe we're going to come out the other end of it, but it's going to be a struggle. A lot of companies are going to go out of business in between. And as a travel advisor, you provide a service to these customers as a filter, so they don't go off willy-nilly and book some random tour operator or something, give them a $2,000 deposit for travel next year, and then the company goes into the vapor and they can't get their money back. That's where you provide an amazing service, because you need, as a travel agent and an advisor, to filter and make sure that the products and companies and brands you book customers with are really sound financially, and there's no issue with them, you know, continuing to operate and protect your client's money and trip.
So I think we all we all know that, yeah, travel will come back. It's just sort of a matter of time right now. But
Mhm.
after those restrictions are lifted, Mark, what's your opinion about how long it might take for things to be, I guess, to reach the new normal, if you will? And are there ways that travelers can prepare today for that time?
So I think the most important thing is to, just like what I've been doing for the last 2 months, is I've been looking at stocks because, I sold my company, thank God, in October. The new owners are struggling because of what's going on, and they rely on travel advertising. So I'm very fortunate that I was able to sell the company last fall. And I've been sitting back, and I've always had a list of great stocks that might have been too expensive to buy 2 months ago. Today, they're dirt cheap. Well, apply that same philosophy to travel. If you have this dream trip of ever going to Bora Bora and staying at the St. Regis, why don't you talk to your travel advisor or travel agent and ask them, hey, what would it cost me to go there? When I went years ago and the euro was like $1.45 or whatever it was, I had a free trip. So all I had to pay for was literally an extra night on the ground because I decided to stay longer, didn't have to pay for the airfare, just really food and beverage. It was still almost $8,000 for a free trip to Tahiti. So now go back and say, well, that would take, it was like $25,000, $30,000 trip all in. Now you go and say, okay, what would it cost today? Well, we know right off the bat with the exchange rate, it would be about a third cheaper. We know that given this market, it's probably even cheaper than that. So does a $25,000, bucket list trip to Tahiti in an overwater bungalow, staying in Bora Bora, does that get down under $10,000? All of a sudden someone's going, wow, okay, I can do some things that I've never been able to do. So to me, I would think about all of the great trips you've always wanted to take, and I would map out how you're going to be able to afford those going forward. And I would look at the policies with your travel agent that say, confidence, to book today because they're giving you an out. If you book, let's say, I think they just extended the Royal Caribbean one out to September. If you make a booking between now and September, pick the date, whatever it was, you can cancel up to 48 hours before your trip. So if your trip's next year and there's something going on, they want you to have confidence that you can just walk away. You don't even need insurance, the outside insurance, which I always encourage people to get, because they're insuring it themselves and saying, just like a hotel, 48-hour cancellation before you arrive. Otherwise, you're on the hook. That's very different than what it was. And I think you're going to see a lot of pricing policies that reflect that, because it gives the customer peace of mind. And that's, what you do as a business. You give the customer peace of mind with your recommendations.
Last question, Mark, and appreciate your time so much today.
No problem.
Again, you have been such a great advocate for travel advisors, travel agents. There are probably a few folks on the video today watching that don't typically work with a travel advisor.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you recommend that they do so?
So what most people don't realize, and unfortunately, I think the associations that have been around for decades have done a poor job of communicating this, is if you work with a travel agent, you typically, the average consumer, if I ask 9 out of 10 consumers, what happens if you work with a travel agent? Does it cost you more money? The answer is, oh yeah, definitely. And the reality is the exact opposite. The travel agent actually saves you money. And what do I mean by that? So there's a thing called parity pricing. And you'll see Marriott and other brands say, hey, book with us, lowest price guaranteed. That's because years ago, Expedia and the big online travel agencies, and FYI to consumers, Expedia is a travel agency. It's just a do-it-yourself travel agency. And then there's nobody to call when you have a problem. So if you book on Orbitz, Travelocity, Expedia, down the line, hotels.com, just keep going down the line, all the brands that Priceline, booking.com, Agoda, FYI, they're owned by 2 companies. Expedia and Booking Holdings own 95% of the online travel agency market in the US. So you're booking with 2 big brands, despite all of the little brands that are under their umbrella. There's no one to call. And what they wanted to do at the hotel level initially, they wanted to say, listen, you can't undercut me at Expedia or Booking.com or wherever, because you can't underprice my website and drive people to you. So everyone's got to pay the same price, level pricing, known as parity pricing. And what they do is they pay you, the travel agent, a commission if you sell that $400 room or $200 room and they pay you whatever their commission is. If the consumer goes to that website and books directly with that hotel chain, they pay the same dollar amount, 200 bucks. And the reason they have you is your distribution channel. I can take Bob Roden, I can magnify him to 100, 200, 400 clients. There's efficiency in that. They see that. That's why they do it. That's why the vast majority of cruises, international airline tickets, tours, et cetera, are all booked by travel agents, because it's more efficient for the brand to do it. Now, they'll obviously want you to come book directly with them. But remember, if you book direct with American Airlines, have you ever been stuck on the phone with American Airlines trying to change a flight, trying to rearrange things, trying to sort it out? All the time. And how frustrating is that, especially today? You can't even get through to these people. So if you use a travel agent, that is a huge advantage. The other thing is that they don't realize, a lot of times you have a shipboard credit, or if you book a certain way, you book 2 nights, you get a 3rd night free at certain brands. That, again, is not out there in the public domain. Only travel agents have that secret sauce. And even if you don't get the added value, you're going to pay the same price that you'd pay anyway. And you got an advocate for you in the case of things like this taking place. So to me, it's a no-brainer. At full disclosure, so I owned a media company. Travel agents, are a big audience for us. Some things I book with a travel agent. Now, obviously, I'm dialed into the industry. Some things I don't. And even though I'm dialed into the industry and I know as much, as most people out there, there are travel agents who would know better, where to stay in the left bank in Paris than I might know. And so I want that insight because, I've been there in a decade and I'm going, you got a great little spot? Yes. And a travel agent booked that for me. So that's where I kind of pick and choose. But if I'm going to go stay at a Hilton Garden Inn in Mount Laurel, New Jersey to go back and see some friends, then I probably don't need a travel agent to do that because it's just faster and easier for me to do it. But anything beyond that, man, you're crazy to not use a travel agent.
Appreciate that. Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been recorded as well, so we'll make this available to folks that weren't able to catch it all live. Hey, just a couple of comments for the audience as we wrap up. You can regularly find Mark on national television. He brings experience, insights, common sense perspective to all things travel. And as Mark said, there are a lot of great deals out there now for travel later. Last thing I'd like to share with you all is that we do have a couple of really great trips lined up for 2021. The first one is in January. Late January, we're going to be taking a group to Israel. We were there in December, and we're going to take a group back in January 2021, a 10-day tour of the Holy Land. We would love for you to join us on that if you're interested. And then lastly, mid-April, tax day of next year, we're going to take a small group to the Northern California wine country for a long weekend. Figure tax day is a really good day to get away and do a little bit of drinking, maybe. If you're interested in either trip, please let us know. And of course, you can always reach us on our Facebook page. It is cruiseplanners-utmosttravel.com. Hey, Mark, thanks again. Have a great day.
You too. And Bob, just to add to that, I've been to Israel. If people want to check out some videos we shot many years ago, all around Israel, Murphy Travels Israel, just type that in on YouTube. That stuff should come up. MurphyTravels.com is my website. And the other thing is I honeymooned in Napa 26 years ago at Auberge de Soleil. So I'm very jealous. It's an amazing spot. So enjoy.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.